Hello, everyone. If you're watching this, you're probably curious, confused, or maybe even skeptical about Bitcoin. You've seen the price go up, crash, rise again, and you've heard people call it everything from digital gold to a scam. And right now, you're asking one question: what is the truth? By the time you finish this video, you won't just have the answer. You'll have complete clarity. You'll understand what Bitcoin really is, how it works, why it was created, what mining actually does, and how Bitcoin is reshaping the idea of money across the world, and much more. No technical nonsense or random hype or confusing crypto talk. Just clear, simple knowledge that actually makes sense. And I want you to believe one thing. If you stay till the end, you'll walk away with the confidence to talk about Bitcoin like someone who's been in the space for years. You won't need another video, another explanation, or another teacher. This is your starting point, and probably your final one. Let's begin. We will divide this whole video in several modules. Let's talk about module number 1, which is about the introduction and history of Bitcoin. You're probably going to skip this part, but trust me, it's very much important. Let's get started. What is money and why Bitcoin exists? Money. We use it every single day, but most of us never stop to ask a simple question. What actually is money? Not the coins, or the paper bills, or the numbers on a banking app. I mean the idea behind it. The purpose. The reason it exists in the first place. To understand Bitcoin, we have to go back in time and explore the story of money itself. Because Bitcoin didn't just appear as a random invention. It was born as a response to problems that existed long before technology was advanced enough to solve them. So let's slow down, sit with this idea, and start from the beginning. Thousands of years ago, humans didn't have money. If you wanted something, you traded. Maybe you had wheat and someone else had cattle. You exchanged value directly. That system was called barter. And at first, it worked. But as societies grew, barter became complicated. What if the person who had the tool you wanted didn't want wheat? What if what you were trading spoiled quickly? What if you needed a way to store value for later? Slowly, humans realized something important. We needed a universal tool, something everyone agreed had value, something durable, portable, divisible, and trusted. That's how early forms of money were born. People started using salt, shells, and precious metals. Out of all the materials humans experimented with, gold became the most powerful form of money. Not because it was shiny, not because it was rare, but because it was hard to fake, easy to transport, and incredibly difficult to produce in large amounts. For centuries, gold became the foundation of trade and wealth. It didn't matter if you lived in Asia, Africa, Europe, or the Americas. Gold meant value. And governments noticed. Instead of carrying chunks of gold around, people began depositing their gold into banks and receiving paper receipts. These receipts represented real gold stored somewhere safe. And soon, those receipts began circulating as money, not because the paper itself had value, but because everyone trusted that the paper could be exchanged for real gold. This era is known as the gold-backed currency system. And it worked. Until governments realized something tempting. They could print more receipts than the gold they had. They could create purchasing power out of thin air. Eventually, the world reached a turning point. In 1971, the United States made a decision that changed global finance forever. The dollar would no longer be backed by gold. From that moment forward, the value of the dollar came not from scarcity or backing, but from trust. Government trust. Institutional trust. Legal trust. This new form of money was called fiat currency. Fiat meaning by decree, or because the government says so. And at first, it seemed fine. People kept spending. Banks kept lending. Life continued. But slowly a silent problem began spreading through the system. When money can be printed infinitely, something predictable happens. The value of each unit decreases over time. What your grandparents bought for a small amount now costs 10 times more. The price of food, housing, education, and healthcare rises constantly. That process is called inflation. And while inflation might seem like a normal part of life, it isn't natural. It's a result of money losing value. People began to feel the effects. Savings lost power. Wages couldn't keep up. Wealth moved slowly from ordinary people toward governments, banks, and large financial institutions. And then came 2008. The global financial crisis exposed the weakness of the system. Banks failed. People lost their homes. Trust collapsed. And in the middle of that chaos, someone or some group under the name Satoshi Nakamoto released an idea that would change the world forever: Bitcoin. It wasn't just digital money. It was a challenge to the foundation of modern finance. Bitcoin introduced a new form of currency that no government could control, no bank could manipulate, and no single authority could print in unlimited amounts. To understand why Bitcoin was revolutionary, think about three simple things. First, scarcity. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, not one more. That makes it similar to digital gold. Second, decentralization. No single person or institution owns or controls Bitcoin. The network runs on thousands of independent computers around the world, all verifying the system together. And third, transparency. Every transaction is recorded publicly on something called the blockchain. Nothing is hidden. Nothing can be tampered with. There is no trust required, because verification is built into the system. Bitcoin was not created to destroy money. It was created to fix the weaknesses of money. It became a modern answer to a very old problem. Let's imagine you store money in a bank. That money is controlled by the bank. If a government freezes accounts, you lose access. If a bank collapses, your money disappears. If inflation increases, your purchasing power shrinks even without spending anything. Bitcoin solves those issues. You control it. No bank can block it. No government can dilute it. And because it is scarce, its value isn't meant to weaken over time. Most people think Bitcoin is just a speculative asset, something people trade, something that goes up and down, something risky. But that's because they are only looking at the price. They're seeing short-term volatility instead of long-term purpose. Bitcoin is a new chapter in the evolution of money. Just like humans moved from barter to metals, from metals to paper, and from paper to digital banking, Bitcoin represents the next step: programmable, borderless, censorship-resistant money. Right now, you might be wondering, if Bitcoin is so powerful, why hasn't everyone adopted it? The answer is simple and predictable. Every financial system in history went through three stages: ridicule, resistance, and acceptance. Bitcoin is currently somewhere between resistance and acceptance. Some countries fear it. Some investors misunderstand it. Some people think it's a trend. But others see it as future infrastructure. If you stay with this course, by the time you're done, you'll understand Bitcoin more clearly than most people who talk about it online. You will not just know what Bitcoin is. You will know why it exists, how it works, why governments can't stop it, and why millions of people are betting their future on it. For now, just take this idea with you. Bitcoin isn't here to replace money. It's here to repair the meaning of money. And this is only the beginning. How Bitcoin works. So now that you understand why Bitcoin exists, let's talk about how it actually works. And I'll keep everything simple, clear, and easy to follow. Bitcoin runs on something called a blockchain. Imagine a notebook. Every time someone sends or receives Bitcoin, that transaction gets written in that notebook. But here's the interesting part. This notebook isn't kept by one person or one bank. Copies of this same notebook are stored on thousands of computers around the world. Everyone has the same record. So if someone tries to cheat, like saying they have more Bitcoin than they actually do, the network compares their claim with all the other notebooks. If it doesn't match, the transaction is rejected. That's how Bitcoin stays honest without needing a bank. Now let's talk about transactions. If you send Bitcoin to someone, you don't need permission from a bank. You don't need a person to approve it. You sign the transaction with something called a private key. Think of it like a secret password only you know. Once you sign it, the transaction gets broadcast to the network and added to the notebook. But before it becomes official, it needs to be confirmed. That confirmation happens through something called mining. Mining sounds complicated, but here's a simple way to think about it. Miners are like security guards. Their job is to check transactions, make sure they're valid, and lock them safely into the blockchain. But instead of doing this manually, they use computers. These computers solve math problems. Whoever solves it first gets the right to add the next page of transactions to the notebook. As a reward for securing the network and recording transactions, miners get paid in Bitcoin. That's how new Bitcoin enters the system. Now here's the interesting part. Every single Bitcoin transaction ever made is stored permanently on the blockchain. You can't delete it. You can't change it. You can't fake it. This creates trust without needing a bank or government. So in simple words, Bitcoin is digital money. Blockchain is the record book. Mining is the system that keeps everything secure and fair. And no single person controls it. This is how Bitcoin works behind the scenes. Since you're ready now, we'll move to Module 3. Do you know about Bitcoin wallets and how to store Bitcoin safely? No worries, I'll explain these all. Now that you know how Bitcoin works, the next important thing is understanding wallets. Because if you ever plan to buy, receive, or store Bitcoin, you need a wallet. And don't worry, a Bitcoin wallet is not like a physical wallet you keep in your pocket. It doesn't actually hold Bitcoin. Bitcoin always stays on the blockchain. The wallet just gives you access to it. So let's keep it simple. A Bitcoin wallet has two important things: a public key and a private key. A public key is like your email address. You can share it with anyone. If someone wants to send you Bitcoin, they use your public key. There's no risk in showing it. A private key is different. Think of it as the master password for all your Bitcoin. If someone gets your private key, they have full control of your money. So the most important rule in Bitcoin is this: never share your private key with anyone. Not with a friend, not with a website, not even with an exchange. If someone asks for it, it's a scam. Now let's talk about the types of wallets. There are mainly two categories: hot wallets and cold wallets. A hot wallet is connected to the internet. It's easy to use, convenient, and good for beginners. Apps like Coinbase Wallet, Binance Wallet, or Trust Wallet are examples. You can send and receive Bitcoin quickly, but since they are online, there is always a small risk of hacking. A cold wallet is offline. These are physical devices that store your private key without internet access. The most popular examples are Ledger and Trezor. Cold wallets are the safest option because even if someone hacks the internet, they can't reach your Bitcoin. Cold wallets are usually for long-term storage. Some people use a simple method called a seed phrase. When you create a wallet, you receive a list of 12 or 24 random words. These words are extremely important because they allow you to recover your wallet if your phone breaks, you lose your device, or you switch systems. If someone gets these words, they can take your Bitcoin. So storing them safely is very important. People store their seed phrase in different ways. Some write it on paper and keep it in a safe place. Some engrave it on metal plates so it can't burn or fade. Just remember, never store it in screenshots, phone notes, WhatsApp, or email. Those places can be hacked. So to summarize, your wallet doesn't hold Bitcoin. Your Bitcoin stays on the blockchain. Your wallet holds keys that give you access to it. Your public key is safe to share. Your private key must remain secret. Hot wallets are easy. Cold wallets are safest. And your seed phrase is your backup lifeline. If you understand this module, then you already know more than many people who buy crypto without learning security. Do you know how Bitcoin gets value? Don't worry if you are unaware of that. Now that you understand how Bitcoin works and how it's stored, the next big question most people have is a simple one. Why does Bitcoin have value? How can something that isn't physical, doesn't come from a bank, and doesn't have government backing be worth thousands of dollars? Let's break it down in the simplest way. Bitcoin has value because people agree it has value. And before that sounds strange, remember, that's exactly how money already works. A dollar is just paper and ink. What gives it value is the belief and trust that others will accept it. If tomorrow nobody accepted dollars, they would be useless. So value is not just physical. Value is belief, trust, and usefulness. There are a few main reasons Bitcoin has value. First, Bitcoin is limited. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins. No more can be created. This makes it scarce. And in basic economics, when something is limited and more people want it, its value increases. This scarcity is built into the system. No government or person can change it. Second, Bitcoin cannot be counterfeited. You can print fake currency. You can forge gold, but you cannot fake Bitcoin because every Bitcoin transaction is verified through the blockchain. The network tracks every movement. That security gives it value. Third, Bitcoin is borderless. You can send it to anyone in the world without asking permission from a bank, without needing documents, and without waiting days. No frozen accounts, no international fees, just direct value transfer. That freedom gives it value. Another reason is decentralization. There is no single company, government, or CEO controlling Bitcoin. So no one can shut it down, inflate it, or manipulate it based on their own agenda. People, especially in unstable economies, see Bitcoin as protection against inflation and government control. Many people also see Bitcoin as digital gold. Like gold, Bitcoin is limited, durable, and hard to obtain. But unlike gold, Bitcoin is easier to store, easier to send, and easier to divide. You don't need a vault. You just need a wallet. That convenience gives it value. There's also something called network effect. The more people who use Bitcoin, the stronger and more valuable it becomes. Companies, investors, and even governments have started adopting it. This growing use increases trust, and trust increases value. Finally, Bitcoin represents something bigger: financial independence. For many, it's not just money. It's a new system, a way for people to control their own finances without relying on banks, politics, or middlemen. So the value of Bitcoin comes from its scarcity, security, global accessibility, decentralization, trust, and usefulness. In short, Bitcoin is valuable because it solves problems that traditional money cannot. If you're ready, we'll move to the next module. So the question is, how can you buy a Bitcoin safely, and what are the common mistakes made by beginners? So now that you understand what Bitcoin is, how it works, how wallets work, and why it has value, the next step is learning how people actually buy Bitcoin in the real world. And just like everything else we learned, we'll keep this simple and beginner-friendly. The easiest way to buy Bitcoin is through a crypto exchange. These are platforms that let you buy, sell, or trade Bitcoin just like you would buy something online. Some of the most common exchanges people use are Coinbase, Binance US, Kraken, and Cash App. They work a little differently, but the basic idea is the same. You create an account, verify your identity, and then you can buy Bitcoin using a debit card or bank transfer. Once you buy Bitcoin on an exchange, there's something very important to understand. The exchange technically holds your Bitcoin until you move it to your personal wallet. So the Bitcoin is yours, but the private key is not. That means if the exchange shuts down or gets hacked, you could lose your Bitcoin. This is why most people move their Bitcoin from the exchange into their personal wallet once they buy it. The process is simple. You buy Bitcoin on the exchange, then you withdraw it to your wallet address. After that, you control it fully. No permission needed. Now let's talk about common beginner mistakes, so you can avoid them. The first mistake is thinking Bitcoin price will always move fast. Some beginners panic when the price drops a little, and they sell too early. Bitcoin is known for ups and downs. It's normal. The long-term trend is what matters, not one day or 1 week. The second mistake is putting all their money into Bitcoin at once. A smarter way is something called dollar cost averaging. This means buying a small fixed amount regularly, like once a week or once a month. This reduces risk and stress because you don't need to time the market. The third mistake is storing Bitcoin on an exchange forever. Exchanges are useful for buying, but they are not the safest place for long-term storage. The fourth mistake is falling for scams. If someone promises guaranteed profit, it's a scam. If someone asks for your private key or seed phrase, it's a scam. Bitcoin does not need anyone to unlock, upgrade, or double your money. Another common mistake is sending Bitcoin to the wrong address. Bitcoin transactions cannot be reversed. So before sending, always double-check the address and test with a small amount first if you're unsure. Some beginners also forget taxes. In many countries, Bitcoin profits are taxable. So understanding tax rules is important if you're investing seriously. And finally, one more mistake is believing they need to buy a full Bitcoin. You don't. Bitcoin can be divided into very small pieces. The smallest unit is called a Satoshi. So you can start with any amount, even a few dollars. So in simple words, buying Bitcoin is easy, but storing it safely and avoiding mistakes is the real skill. Take your time, move carefully, and learn step by step. If you're ready, we'll continue to the next module. What makes Bitcoin resistant to attacks? If someone wants to hack Bitcoin, they would need more computer power than the rest of the entire network combined. That is nearly impossible and extremely expensive. Now let's talk about something called the halving. Every 4 years, the reward miners receive gets cut in half. In the early days, miners earned 50 Bitcoin per block. Then it dropped to 25, then 12.5, and now it's even less. This halving process will continue until all 21 million Bitcoin are released. This slowing supply is one reason Bitcoin becomes more valuable over time. Mining today is very different from the early days. In the beginning, people could mine using normal computers at home. Then they needed stronger GPUs. Now mining is done using specialized machines called ASIC miners. These machines are built only for mining Bitcoin and nothing else. They are powerful, but they also use a lot of electricity. Electricity cost is the biggest expense in mining. So miners usually operate in places where power is cheap or renewable, like hydroelectric regions. Some miners even use wasted or excess energy that would otherwise be unused. Mining is not just about making Bitcoin. It also protects the entire network. Because miners compete and invest time, energy, and money, attacking Bitcoin becomes incredibly difficult. This system makes Bitcoin one of the most secure financial networks in the world. You may be wondering, can I mine Bitcoin today? Technically, yes, but for most people, it isn't practical because mining requires expensive equipment, constant electricity, and cooling. Many people instead participate in something called mining pools. In a pool, miners combine their computing power and share rewards based on how much work each miner contributed. So to summarize simply, mining creates new Bitcoin. Mining secures the network. Miners solve puzzles using computers. The first one to solve it earns Bitcoin. Rewards decrease every 4 years. And mining has become a large global industry. Understanding mining helps you appreciate how powerful and secure Bitcoin really is. Whenever you're ready, we'll move on to the next module. Now I'll teach you how to send and receive Bitcoin. Now that you know how buying, storing, and mining work, it's time to learn something practical: how to actually send and receive Bitcoin. This is the part where most people get nervous because they think it's complicated. But once you understand the steps, it becomes simple and routine. Let's start with receiving Bitcoin. To receive Bitcoin, all you need is your public wallet address. This address looks like a long string of letters and numbers. Sometimes wallets also show a QR code. You share that address with the person sending you Bitcoin. They paste it into their wallet, choose an amount, and send. That's it. After a few confirmations on the blockchain, the Bitcoin appears in your wallet. The important thing here is that you only share your public address, never your private key or seed phrase. The sender doesn't need anything except your public address. Now let's talk about sending Bitcoin. When you want to send Bitcoin to someone, your wallet will ask you for the receiver's address and the amount you want to send. Sometimes wallets also let you choose the network fee. This fee is paid to miners for processing the transaction. If you choose a higher fee, the transaction usually gets confirmed faster. If you choose a lower fee, it may take longer. Different wallets offer different fee options. Some wallets choose the fee automatically based on network activity. Once you confirm the transaction, it goes into something called the mempool. The mempool is like a waiting room where unconfirmed transactions sit until miners add them to a block. After your transaction gets picked up and confirmed, it becomes permanent. Something important to understand is that Bitcoin transactions cannot be reversed. If you send Bitcoin to the wrong address or wrong person, there is no support button, no customer service, and no undo option. This is why double-checking the address is important. Many people copy and paste the address and then verify the first few characters and the last few characters to make sure it's correct. There's also something called a test payment. This means sending a very small amount first to make sure everything works before sending the full amount. Many experienced users do this when sending larger amounts. Sometimes people wonder how long transactions take. The time can vary. It may be a few seconds, or it may take several minutes. It depends on network activity and fee level. But once enough confirmations are completed, the transaction is final. Some wallets also allow labeling addresses. For example, you can name one address savings, another friend, and another exchange withdrawal. This makes management easier instead of dealing with random characters. One more thing to mention is transaction transparency. Bitcoin transactions are public. Anyone can see them on the blockchain. They won't see your name, identity, or details, but they can see the address and the amount. This is why Bitcoin is called pseudonymous. Not fully anonymous, but also not linked directly to personal identity unless you share it. So sending and receiving Bitcoin is simple once you understand the process. You receive Bitcoin by sharing your public address. You send Bitcoin by entering someone else's address and confirming the transaction. Fees affect speed. Transactions cannot be reversed. And every transaction becomes part of the blockchain. Now you're getting closer to using Bitcoin like someone who truly understands it. Whenever you're ready, we'll move forward to the next module. Now I'll tell you how to transfer, send, and receive Bitcoin safely. Let's start. So now that you understand wallets, keys, and how Bitcoin actually works, it's time to learn one of the most practical parts of using Bitcoin. How do you actually send it? How do you receive it? And most importantly, how do you do it safely without losing your coins or sending them to the wrong person? I want you to imagine this like sending money digitally, but smarter. There's no bank in between. There's no one reviewing your transaction or approving it. Once you hit confirm, that's it. The blockchain records it, and there's no undo button. So learning this properly is very important. Let's begin with receiving Bitcoin. When you want to receive Bitcoin, your wallet gives you something called a wallet address. It's a long string of letters and numbers. Sometimes it looks complicated, but think of it like a bank account number. You give this address to the person sending you Bitcoin. Some wallets also give a QR code, which makes it easier. The sender can scan that code with their phone, and the address is automatically entered. No typing, no mistakes. Before accepting a transaction, always double-check that the address belongs to the correct wallet. One wrong character and the Bitcoin could go somewhere else forever. There is no support hotline that will get it back for you. Once someone sends Bitcoin to your address, it doesn't appear instantly. First, it goes to the blockchain network. Then miners verify it. In a few minutes, depending on the network load and transaction fee, you'll see it confirmed in your wallet. Now let's talk about sending Bitcoin. First, open your wallet and choose the option to send or transfer. Then paste the recipient's Bitcoin address. Never type it manually. Always copy and paste or scan the QR code. After that, choose how much Bitcoin you want to send. Most wallets allow you to choose the transaction fee. A higher fee means faster confirmation. A lower fee means it could take longer. Once everything looks correct, you confirm. Some wallets will ask for two-step verification or password. After you confirm, the transaction goes to the blockchain and waits for miners to process it. Once it's verified, it becomes permanent. Now let's talk about mistakes people make. One of the biggest mistakes is sending Bitcoin to a wrong chain or wrong address format. Bitcoin addresses start differently than Ethereum or other crypto addresses. If you send Bitcoin to a non-Bitcoin address, it won't arrive and you can't get it back. Always make sure the address belongs to the same network. Another mistake is panic when a transaction doesn't show up immediately. Blockchain confirmations take time. Sometimes a few minutes, sometimes longer depending on traffic and fees. So don't rush or panic. Another important thing is copy-paste safety. Sometimes your device could have malware that replaces addresses when you paste them. So always double-check the first few characters and last few characters of the address before sending. Now let's talk about safety best practices. Use a secure wallet. Always enable two-factor authentication. Keep your seed phrase offline. Never share it with anyone. And always confirm addresses carefully before sending. Once you learn this process, it becomes easy. Sending and receiving Bitcoin is fast, direct, and borderless. No bank hours, no hidden fees, no approvals, no delays. Just peer-to-peer money. You've officially learned one of the most practical skills in the crypto world. And now you understand how to move your Bitcoin safely and confidently. So now you have mastered more than 50% about Bitcoin, and the rest will be completed in the following modules. I've told you before how Bitcoin gets its value, but we need to understand it in depth. Let's begin. Now that you understand how Bitcoin is stored, sent, and secured, the next question almost everyone asks is simple. Why is Bitcoin valuable? It's just digital, there's no physical coin, no gold backing it, no government controlling it. So why do people pay thousands of dollars for something you can't touch? To understand this, we need to start with something basic. Value comes from trust, demand, and usefulness. Most people think value is something physical, like gold or paper money. But the truth is, almost all money in the world today is based on belief. If you walk into a store with cash, the only reason someone accepts it is because everyone around you agrees that it has value. Governments print money, but it's trust that makes it valuable. Bitcoin works in a similar way, but with one major difference. Unlike paper currency, no one can print more Bitcoin whenever they want. Bitcoin has a fixed supply of 21 million coins. That limit will never change. Because of that, Bitcoin behaves more like digital gold instead of normal money. Now let's talk about one of the biggest reasons Bitcoin has value. Scarcity. Things that are rare often become valuable. Gold is rare, Land is limited. Rare art becomes expensive. Bitcoin is scarce by design. Every 4 years, new Bitcoin entering the system gets reduced in an event called the halving. This makes Bitcoin harder to mine over time, increasing the effort and cost needed to create new coins. So while demand can grow, supply cannot. This naturally drives long-term value. Next, let's talk about usefulness. Bitcoin allows anyone, anywhere, to send value without a bank, without permission, and without asking anyone to approve it. This makes Bitcoin useful in places where people don't trust banks, where currency loses value fast, or where financial systems are weak. For millions of people, Bitcoin is not an investment. It's financial freedom. Now, another key factor is security. Bitcoin is backed by the largest computer network in the world. Millions of miners across the planet verify transactions and protect the system. Because of this, Bitcoin hasn't been hacked, shut down, or controlled by any single group. That gives people confidence. And confidence creates value. Another part of Bitcoin's value comes from network effects. The more people who use it, the more valuable it becomes. This is the same principle behind things like the internet, email, or social media. When just a few people use something, it's not powerful. But when millions join, the system becomes valuable and eventually essential. Now let's talk about perception. Some people see Bitcoin as a store of value, like gold. Some see it as an investment with long-term potential. Some see it as a hedge against inflation. And some see it as the future of global money. These beliefs create real-world demand. Next, we need to talk about market psychology. Bitcoin's price is influenced by big investors, retail buyers, global news, regulations, and economic trends. When large companies announce they support Bitcoin, the price rises. When governments discuss regulation, the price may fall. But over time, Bitcoin has consistently moved upward because adoption continues to grow. Another factor is accessibility. Today, anyone with a phone and internet connection can buy Bitcoin. You don't need a bank account or financial approval. That openness is powerful. It turns Bitcoin into something global, borderless, and available to everyone. Now let's talk about inflation. Most world currencies lose value over time because governments print more money. But Bitcoin moves in the opposite direction. As supply decreases and demand grows, Bitcoin becomes deflationary. This is rare in the financial world. I've told you about the Bitcoin halving. But what does it mean and why does this happen? Let's begin. Bitcoin has a lot of unique features, but one of the most important events in its entire system is something called the Bitcoin halving. If you understand this, you understand why Bitcoin becomes more valuable over time, why supply decreases, and why people sometimes say Bitcoin is digital gold. So what is halving? To keep it simple, every time someone mines a new block of Bitcoin, they receive a reward. In Bitcoin's early days, that reward was 50 Bitcoin per block. But Bitcoin was designed to reduce this reward every 4 years. So after the first halving, the reward dropped from 50 coins to 25. Then it dropped again to 12.5. Then to 6.25. And now it continues to shrink over time. This event continues every 4 years until eventually no new Bitcoin will be created. The total supply will stop at 21 million coins. After that point, miners will only earn transaction fees, not new coins. Why does this matter? Halving makes Bitcoin predictable. Unlike normal money, where governments can print more anytime, Bitcoin has a fixed, declining supply. When supply becomes smaller and demand keeps growing, value tends to increase. You've probably heard the phrase, scarcity creates value. This is why gold is expensive. It's rare, limited, and takes effort to extract. Bitcoin behaves the same way. Mining becomes harder, and rewards become smaller, which means every coin mined in the future costs more energy and more time. Now let's talk about what usually happens around halving periods. Historically, before the halving happens, Bitcoin price moves slowly or sometimes even drops. But after the halving, something interesting happens. Price tends to rise over the next 12 to 18 months. This is because fewer new coins are entering the market, but people are still buying. It's basic economics. Lower supply plus steady or rising demand equals upward movement. Let's talk about miners for a moment. When halving happens, miners earn fewer coins for the same work. That means inefficient miners sometimes shut down because their cost becomes too high. Only the strongest and most efficient miners stay. This creates a competitive environment and strengthens the network. Next, let's look at adoption. Every time a halving approaches, awareness increases. People start talking, media covers it. New investors enter the market. Institutions start preparing. Sometimes companies and countries even begin collecting Bitcoin, not because they need it today, but because they believe it will be valuable tomorrow. Another important point, halving is automatic. No government decides it. No company controls it. No vote or permission is needed. The code performs the halving exactly on schedule. That reliability makes Bitcoin predictable compared to the uncertainty of traditional financial systems. Now let's talk about psychology. Investors know the supply will tighten. People who already own Bitcoin hesitate to sell because they believe it may become more valuable. So trading volume shifts. Instead of fast selling, people hold, or as the Bitcoin community calls it, HODL. Finally, let's talk about the long-term picture. There will be many halvings until the year 2140. After that, there will be no new Bitcoin. When that day arrives, the entire system will rely on transaction fees. That means Bitcoin will function as a fully completed digital asset with a permanently fixed supply. So the Bitcoin halving is one of the most important parts of its design. It slowly reduces inflation. It increases scarcity. It rewards long-term holders. And it ensures the system remains fair and predictable for decades. Now you know why people pay attention to every halving event. When you're ready, you can move on to the second last module. Now let's talk about the risks and challenges of Bitcoin. Let's begin. Up to this point, we've talked a lot about how Bitcoin works, why it matters, and why millions of people believe in it. But before someone becomes confident in using Bitcoin, it's important to understand the other side of the story. Bitcoin has benefits, but it also has risks. Knowing these risks will help you make smarter decisions, avoid mistakes, and protect your investments. First, let's talk about volatility. Bitcoin prices move fast. Some days it goes up sharply, and some days it falls just as quickly. This price movement can feel exciting, but it can also be stressful. Bitcoin doesn't behave like a stable currency. It behaves more like a young technology combined with an asset that the world is still learning to understand. If you're holding Bitcoin, you must be emotionally prepared for fluctuations. The key is patience and long-term thinking. Next, let's discuss regulation. Bitcoin is global, but every country has its own rules. Some governments support Bitcoin, some are neutral, and some restrict it. Laws can change over time. Sometimes government announcements influence the price. As adoption grows, regulation will become clearer, but right now it's still developing, and that makes the environment uncertain. Another risk is user responsibility. There is no bank to call if you lose your password or transfer Bitcoin to the wrong address. If you lose your private keys or seed phrase, your Bitcoin is gone forever. This sounds harsh, but it is part of what makes Bitcoin decentralized. You are your own bank, and that comes with power and responsibility. Now let's talk about scams. Because Bitcoin is new and many people don't fully understand it, scammers take advantage. Fake trading platforms, fake giveaways, phishing websites, and Ponzi schemes exist everywhere. The rule is simple. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Nobody can guarantee profit, nobody can double your Bitcoin, and you should never share your private keys or seed phrase with anyone. Security is another important area. Bitcoin's network is extremely secure, but individual users can be careless. Hackers don't attack Bitcoin itself. They attack weak passwords, unsecured devices, or cloud storage. Protecting wallets, using hardware devices, enabling two-factor authentication, and storing seed phrases offline are essential habits. Another challenge is understanding. Bitcoin can feel confusing in the beginning. Some people give up because blockchain concepts, wallets, mining, and technology sound complex. But just like learning to use the internet when it was new, it gets easier the more you use it. Education is the key. The more you learn, the more confident you become. Now let's talk about adoption speed. Bitcoin is growing, but we're still early. Not every store accepts it. Not every country recognizes it. This is changing quickly, but full global adoption will take time. Just like the early days of credit cards or smartphones, things feel slow in the beginning and normal later. Energy use is another topic. Bitcoin mining requires electricity. Some people criticize it, saying it wastes energy. Others argue that Bitcoin encourages renewable power, stabilizes unused energy grids, and helps build sustainable energy infrastructure. This debate continues, and it will shape Bitcoin's future development. Finally, there's emotional risk. People sometimes make decisions based on fear or excitement. When prices rise, some rush to buy. When prices fall, many panic and sell. Emotional reactions can lead to losses. Understanding Bitcoin, setting goals, and following a plan help avoid emotional decision-making. So yes, Bitcoin has risks, but those risks don't exist because Bitcoin is broken. They exist because Bitcoin is new, disruptive, and different from traditional financial systems. Learning how to manage these risks is what separates careless users from confident ones. And now that you understand the risks, you're closer to thinking like a responsible Bitcoin user. You have almost completed the course. Now let's talk about the future of Bitcoin. And yeah, it's our last module. If you're still watching this video, make sure to subscribe for more useful content. Let's begin. Now that you've learned what Bitcoin is, how it works, how to use it, and what risks come with it, there's one final question that everyone eventually asks. What happens next? Bitcoin isn't just a currency or a technology. It's a movement. It's a shift in how people think about money, freedom, ownership, and trust. Bitcoin challenges systems that have existed for generations. Because of that, its future isn't simple, but it is exciting. Let's talk about the short-term future first. Right now, Bitcoin is still growing. Every year, more companies start accepting it. More people set up wallets. More developers join the network. More countries consider regulation. As adoption increases, the price becomes more stable, and Bitcoin becomes a normal part of financial life rather than something experimental. Next, let's talk about mainstream use. In the future, buying coffee or paying for streaming services with Bitcoin may feel as normal as using a credit card today. Fast transactions through Lightning Network, better wallets, and improved user experience will make Bitcoin easier and more natural for everyday payments. Now let's move to global adoption. Some countries already treat Bitcoin as legal money. Others hold Bitcoin in reserves like they hold gold. Over time, more governments may adopt this strategy. Bitcoin gives countries financial independence, especially those with unstable currencies. In the future, Bitcoin may act as a global neutral money that belongs to everyone and no one. Another important part of the future is institutional involvement. Large companies, investment firms, and banks are already exploring Bitcoin. As regulations become clear and markets mature, Bitcoin could become a standard asset class, just like stocks, bonds, and real estate. Retirement accounts, investment portfolios, and business treasury strategies may eventually include Bitcoin by default. Now let's talk technology. Bitcoin may evolve in ways we can't fully predict. New layers, privacy improvements, decentralized identity systems, and smart contract extensions could expand what Bitcoin can do. But one thing will remain. The core blockchain rules will stay stable. Bitcoin doesn't change quickly or easily, and that's what makes it trustworthy. Next, let's discuss culture. Bitcoin has already created communities, education systems, events, and innovation hubs across the world. Developers build tools, artists create digital art, and teachers help beginners understand Bitcoin. This culture will grow stronger over time, shaping how people think about finance and freedom. But the most interesting part of Bitcoin's future isn't technology, it's impact. Imagine a world where no government can inflate your savings. Imagine a world where sending money across borders takes seconds, not days. Imagine a world where anyone with a phone can participate in the global economy without permission. Bitcoin may help create that world. Now let's talk long-term. One day, all Bitcoin will be mined. The supply will be fixed forever. At that point, Bitcoin becomes something extremely rare and globally distributed. When the world has a fixed supply asset with increasing demand, history suggests value rises and stabilizes over time. Whether Bitcoin becomes a world reserve asset, a common medium for global payments, or a long-term store of value, one thing is certain. Bitcoin has already changed financial history. And now that you've reached the end of this course, you're no longer someone who just heard about Bitcoin. You're someone who understands it. You know how it works, why it exists, and how to use it safely. Most people never reach this point. So congratulations, you now belong to the group of people who are prepared for the digital future of money. Whenever you're ready, go explore Bitcoin in the real world. Alright, if you're still here watching, then one thing is obvious. You're not just casually interested. You're actually serious about learning Bitcoin and understanding how this world works. And honestly, this is just the beginning. In the upcoming modules, we're going even deeper. We'll talk about real security, real mistakes people make, how to avoid getting scammed, and how to actually use Bitcoin in the real world. These aren't the things you'll find easily online, and most people have no idea about them. So if you want to stay ahead, and you want every new episode the moment it drops, that subscribe button is right there. Hit subscribe. Turn on notifications, because if you miss the next chapter, trust me, you'll regret it later. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one.